She cheated on me last night. I know this because I saw it with my own eyes. The city was asleep, wrapped in a quiet hum of distant sirens and the occasional hush of passing cars. I wasn't supposed to be there, standing in the shadows of a dimly lit street, my hands clenched into fists inside my coat pockets. I was supposed to be at home, waiting for her like a fool, believing her when she said she had a late work dinner. But something inside me wouldn't let it go. The small things, the missing laughter in her voice, the way she turned her phone face down when I walked into the room, the sudden scent of cologne that wasn't mine, had been gnawing at me for weeks. And so, I followed her. The restaurant was a place we had never been together, a cozy, intimate corner of the city where lovers whispered secrets over candlelight. I spotted her through the window before I even reached the door. She was laughing, her head tilted back in a way that used to be just for me. But the man sitting across from her wasn't me. I froze. My stomach twisted into something ugly, something raw. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers, and she didn't pull away. That was all the proof I needed. I should have stormed inside, should have demanded answers, made a scene, let her see the wreckage of what she had just destroyed. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away, the weight of betrayal sinking into my bones like ice water. She thought she was clever. She thought she was careful. She had no idea that last night, she lost me forever. And she had no idea what I was going to do next. I didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, I walked. Past the quiet streets where shopkeepers had long since locked their doors, past the bars spilling drunken laughter onto the sidewalk, past the couples tangled in each other's arms as if the night belonged only to them. My feet carried me without direction, my thoughts unraveling into something jagged and unrecognizable. 2 years. That was how long she had been with him. I knew because when I finally stepped inside our apartment, our home, I made a choice I never thought I would make. I turned on her laptop. Claire had always been meticulous. She locked her phone. She cleared her call logs. She never left a trace where she thought I might find it. But she underestimated me. Or maybe she was just careless, too comfortable in the lie she had been living. It took me less than an hour to recover her deleted messages. His name was Jason. I didn't know him, but I knew the way she spoke to him. The words that used to be mine. I miss you. I can't wait to see you. Last night was incredible. Were now his. There were hundreds of messages. Late-night texts, hidden rendezvous, weekend trips that were supposed to be girls' getaways. I read every one of them, even when it felt like I was peeling my own skin off with each new revelation. And then, the worst of it, photos. I stared at the images on the screen, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk so tightly I thought the wood might splinter beneath them. There she was, my Claire, in places I didn't recognize, wrapped around a man I had never met, smiling in a way that once felt like home. The realization hit me like a slow, crushing weight. The woman I loved no longer existed. Maybe she had disappeared a long time ago, and I had just been too blind to see it. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. It wasn't anger that settled inside me. Not yet. It was something colder, something deeper. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Because if she had spent the last 2 years lying to me, then I could spend a little more time pretending. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft glow of the laptop screen casting sharp shadows against the walls. The messages between Claire and Jason replayed in my mind, each word carving deeper wounds into my chest. But the pain didn't consume me the way I thought it would. No, something else settled in its place. Clarity. She thought she was in control. She thought she had fooled me. She had no idea I had just rewritten the rules. By the time the sun crept over the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of pale gold, I had a plan. I wasn't going to rage. I wasn't going to throw accusations at her feet like a desperate man begging for an explanation. She didn't deserve that power. Instead, I was going to dismantle her world piece by piece, the same way she had dismantled mine. When Claire came home later that morning, she didn't look like someone carrying a guilty conscience. She didn't sneak through the door, avoiding my gaze. No, she walked in like nothing had changed, stretching her arms with a soft yawn as she set her purse on the counter. "Morning," she said, her voice light, effortless. I looked up from the newspaper I wasn't actually reading and gave her a small smile. Morning. You're up early. Couldn't sleep much, she sighed. The work dinner went late, and I was exhausted by the time I got back to the hotel. You know how these things are. She was testing me, seeing if I'd question her, if I'd push back. I didn't. Yeah, I figured, I said, folding the paper and leaning back in my chair. I hope it was productive. She hesitated for only half a second, too short for someone who didn't know her to notice, but long enough for me to see the wheels turning in her head. It was, she said, forcing a smile. Lots of networking. You would have been bored out of your mind. I chuckled, pretending to believe her, pretending like I hadn't spent the night staring at undeniable proof that she was nothing more than a beautifully packaged lie. She leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to my cheek, and I let her. I even kissed her back. The next few days were a delicate balancing act. I played my part well, the devoted boyfriend who had no idea his world was crumbling beneath him. Claire continued living her double life, sneaking off to Jason with the same ease she had perfected over the past 2 years. She had no idea I was watching, tracking her movements, reading her texts, piecing together the parts of her life she had hidden from me. Every time she told me she was working late, I knew exactly where she was. Every time she said she was grabbing drinks with friends, I saw the hotel reservations she thought she had deleted. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I was a fool. But what she didn't realize was that the foundation of her carefully built lie was starting to crack, and I was the one holding the hammer. And I was just getting started. The first time I followed her, it was just to see if she'd lie to my face again. It was a Wednesday night. Claire kissed me goodbye, running her fingers through my hair like she always did before heading to the office. I smiled, told her to have a good night, and watched her walk out the door. 15 minutes later, I was in my car, trailing hers from 3 cars back. She didn't go to work. She drove across the city, past familiar streets, past places we had once gone together, and parked in front of a boutique hotel. I should have felt something. Rage, heartbreak, devastation. But all I felt was a cold, detached curiosity. How far was she willing to go? I waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. And then, there he was. Jason. He strolled up to the hotel entrance like he belonged there. Like this was routine. He didn't even hesitate. Just walked right through the door, knowing Claire was already waiting for him inside. I could have followed him in. I could have confronted them, ripped the truth out of them in front of everyone. But that wasn't the point of this. Claire had taken her time weaving this betrayal into my life, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it so easily. She had built something behind my back. I wanted to burn it down while she was still inside. That night, when Claire came home, she slipped into bed beside me, her body warm from a shower that wasn't taken in our apartment. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing slow into the steady rhythm of sleep. I could have woken her up. I could have whispered in her ear, "I know everything." But instead, I reached for my phone. I had taken photos earlier, her car outside the hotel, Jason entering. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Proof. Evidence. And then, I made the first move. I sent a message to an unknown number, one I had found in Claire's phone weeks ago. A woman named Olivia, Jason's wife. The next morning, Claire moved through the apartment with the same effortless ease, making coffee, humming softly under her breath. "Anything interesting happening today?" she asked, sipping from her mug. I glanced up from my phone, hiding my smirk behind my own cup. "Not much. Just a quiet day." She smiled. "Sounds nice." I wondered how nice it would sound when her entire world started unraveling. Because Olivia had read my message, and she had replied. I met Olivia 2 days later. She was nothing like I had imagined. In my head, I pictured someone fragile, someone on the verge of breaking just like me. Instead, the woman who sat across from me in the dimly lit cafe was composed. Her nails painted a deep red, her expression unreadable behind oversized sunglasses. "I knew," she said, stirring her coffee absently. "Not everything, but enough." Her voice was smooth, practiced, like she had been preparing for this conversation long before I ever reached out. "How long?" I asked. She took a sip of her drink, her lips curling into something almost amused. A year, maybe more. Jason's a creature of habit, and he's not as discreet as he thinks he is. I swallowed, trying to push down the frustration bubbling inside me. A year. She had known for a year, while I had spent the last two blindly playing the devoted fool. I don't understand, I admitted. Why didn't you do anything? She finally removed her sunglasses, leveling me with a sharp gaze. Because men like Jason, and women like your Claire, don't just stop. If it wasn't with each other, it would have been with someone else. I was waiting for the right moment. I frowned. For what? A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. To ruin him. The thing about betrayal is that it changes you. It rewires your brain, alters the way you see the world. When Claire had first started lying to me, I was a man who wanted answers. A man who believed that, deep down, maybe there was something worth salvaging. But that man was dead. And the man sitting across from Olivia? He wasn't interested in saving anything. I want her to know what it feels like, I admitted, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. To lose everything. To wake up one day and realize that everything she thought was safe has been taken from her. Olivia leaned back in her seat, tapping one perfectly manicured nail against the table. Then let's make sure we do this right. I expected her to want something messy, a confrontation, some explosive scene where Jason and Claire were exposed in front of everyone. But Olivia wasn't interested in theatrics. She wanted to dismantle him, quietly, methodically, and I was going to do the same to Claire. I started with the money. Claire had no idea how much of our finances I handled. She thought she did. She had access to our accounts, our bills, our mortgage. But what she didn't realize was that I had been moving things around for weeks. Little by little, I started separating myself from her financially. I pulled my name from joint accounts. I rerouted my paycheck to a new bank. I documented every expense she made using my money, the dinners, the hotel stays, the gifts she had undoubtedly given Jason. And then, I waited. The first rail crack appeared the following week. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV, when Claire let out a frustrated sigh from the dining table. What's wrong? I asked, not looking away from the screen. My card was declined, she muttered, clicking furiously on her laptop. That doesn't make any sense. There should be plenty in our account. I hid my smirk. Not anymore. Maybe it's just a bank error, I offered. You should call them. She nodded, already dialing the number, her frustration mounting. I listened as she argued with the representative, her tone shifting from confusion to barely restrained panic. What do you mean the account is restricted? She snapped. I don't understand, my husband and I. She went silent. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Slowly, she looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something real in her eyes. Fear. I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch between us, and then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I smiled. Because she knew. She finally knew. And this was only the beginning. Claire didn't say anything that night. She paced the apartment, phone in hand, calling the bank again and again, as if repeating the same questions would somehow give her different answers. I watched from the couch, pretending to be concerned, feigning confusion when she looked at me like I was supposed to have the missing piece. By midnight, she was frustrated enough to snap. Did you do something? She asked, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, arms crossed tightly over her chest. I turned off the TV slowly, dragging out the moment. Do something? She huffed, shifting her weight from foot to foot. To our account. There's money missing, Ethan. I ran a hand over my face, forcing myself to look just the right amount of exhausted. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Her voice was sharp, the first crack of panic leaking through. I checked the statements. Transfers I don't recognize, withdrawals. The bank said the account is restricted, that I need your authorization to access it. I stood, stretching, as if this conversation was nothing more than an inconvenience. That's strange, I mused. I'll check on it tomorrow. Her nostrils flared. Check on it now. I tilted my head. Why are you so worried about money, Claire? She faltered, just for a second, and I savored it. She stammered, before catching herself. I need to pay some bills. Bills? I raised an eyebrow. Like the rent? Because I already paid that. She hesitated. I took a slow step toward her, watching as she shrank back ever so slightly. Or is there something else you need the money for? I asked softly. Her lips parted, her throat bobbing with a nervous swallow. She knew. She knew that I knew. But she wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. The next morning, I continued as if nothing had happened. I kissed Claire on the cheek before I left for work, just like always. She smiled, but it was tight. Her eyes scanning my face for answers she wasn't ready to ask out loud. Good. Let her wonder. By the time I arrived at my office, Olivia had already sent me a text. Olivia, he's unraveling. I smirked. The night before, Olivia had sent Jason the same anonymous text I had sent her. A handful of photos, vague but damning, just enough to make him sweat. She knew him well enough to know exactly how he would react. Me? How bad? Olivia. Bad enough that he asked me if I've been following him. He's paranoid. I played dumb, of course. Me good. Let him dig his own grave. I could almost hear her laughter through the screen. Olivia, how's your wife? I glanced at my phone, where a text from Claire sat unread. Claire, we need to talk tonight. I felt a slow, satisfied burn in my chest. Me, she's right where I want her. That night, Claire waited for me at the dining table, hands wrapped around a glass of wine she hadn't touched. I sat across from her, stretching out the silence, watching her fidget. Finally, she spoke. I know something's going on, she said, voice tight. I blinked. What do you mean? Her fingers clenched around the stem of her glass. Don't do that, Ethan. Don't act like I'm crazy. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. I never said you were crazy. She exhaled sharply, her frustration mounting. Just tell me the truth. What's going on with the bank account? With you? I met her gaze, holding it for a long, heavy moment. Then, I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to send a chill down her spine. What truth, Claire? She froze. I saw it then, the flicker of realization. The way her lips parted, her eyes widening just slightly. She knew. She knew that I wasn't oblivious anymore. And now, she was afraid. But I wasn't done. Not yet. For the first time in years, Claire looked small. She sat across from me at the dining table, shoulders tense, fingers clenched so tightly around her wine glass that I thought it might shatter. The confident, effortless woman I had once loved, the woman who had spent 2 years living a double life, was unraveling right in front of me, and I enjoyed every second of it. What truth, Claire? I repeated, keeping my voice calm, steady. She blinked, as if she had forgotten how to breathe. I don't know, she stammered. She was lying. I could see it in the way her throat bobbed when she swallowed, in the way her eyes flickered toward the door, like she was already planning her escape. I let the silence stretch between us, suffocating and thick. Then, finally, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. Okay, I said simply. If you don't know, then I guess there's nothing to talk about. I stood and grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? She asked quickly, her voice higher than usual. I turned to her, tilting my head. Why do you care? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I let the question hang in the air before I walked out the door, leaving her alone in the apartment with nothing but her own guilty thoughts. I drove aimlessly for an hour, the city lights blurring past me as I replayed every lie Claire had ever told. But I wasn't thinking about her anymore. Not really. I was thinking about what came next. I pulled into a parking lot outside a bar, one of those quiet places where nobody asked questions. Olivia was already there, waiting for me in a corner booth. She raised an eyebrow as I slid into the seat across from her. How did it go? I signaled the bartender for a whiskey before answering. She's cracking. Olivia smirked, swirling the ice in her drink. Good. We had spent the past few days crafting a plan. One that wasn't about screaming matches or public humiliation. That would be too easy. No, we wanted something deeper. Something they wouldn't see coming. I need to accelerate things, I said. Olivia took a sip of her drink, watching me carefully. And how do you plan to do that? I glanced down at my phone, at the string of unread messages from Claire. She's desperate, I said. And desperate people make mistakes. Olivia smiled. Then let's make sure she makes the right ones. The next day, I played my part perfectly. I came home late, my shirt slightly unbuttoned, my hair tousled as if I had been somewhere I shouldn't have been. Claire was waiting in the living room, her face pale, her hands wringing in her lap. "Where were you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I smirked, kicking off my shoes. "Out." Her jaw tightened. "Out where?" I walked past her, deliberately slow, and poured myself a glass of water. "Funny," I mused. "That's the same answer you used to give me." She sucked in a sharp breath. I turned to face her, watching the way her chest rose and fell, the way her fingers dug into the couch cushions. She was panicking. Good. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting her stew in the silence before I delivered the final blow. "I know, Claire," I said softly. Her breath hitched. "I know about Jason," I continued. "I know about the hotel. I know about the texts." She didn't even try to deny it. She just stared at me, her entire body trembling. And then, in a whisper so quiet I almost didn't hear it, "How long have you known?" I smiled, cold and sharp. "Long enough." Claire didn't move. She sat frozen on the couch, her lips slightly parted, her breath coming in shallow, uneven pulls. If I hadn't been so disgusted, I might have pitied her. But pity was something I had run out of long ago. "Ethan," she finally whispered, her voice trembling, "please let me explain." I laughed, an actual laugh, cold and sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Explain what, Claire?" I took a step closer, watching her shrink into herself. "Explain how you spent 2 years lying to my face? How you climbed into my bed after leaving his." She flinched. I wanted her to flinch. I set my glass down with deliberate slowness, leaning forward just enough to watch the panic spread across her face. "Or do you want to explain how you used my money to fund your little affair?" Her eyes widened. I held up a hand. "Save it." I could see it now, the war inside her. She was calculating, trying to find the right move, the right words that might undo the damage. But there was nothing left to salvage. She knew it, and I knew it. So, I decided to push her over the edge. "You were good," I admitted. "Really good. I almost didn't see it. Almost believed every little excuse you gave me." I walked around the couch, circling her like a predator. "But do you know what the worst part is?" I asked, lowering my voice. She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. I crouched beside her, so close I could see the way her fingers trembled in her lap. "I would have given you everything," I whispered. "I did give you everything." She sucked in a breath, her whole body tightening as if bracing for a blow. But I didn't yell. I didn't lash out. I just stood up and walked away, because nothing I could say would hurt her more than the truth itself. Claire tried to talk to me the next morning. I had barely slept, my mind a restless storm of thoughts, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing that. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, arms wrapped around herself, looking small and fragile. "Ethan," she murmured. I didn't look at her. I poured my coffee, took a slow sip, and scrolled through my phone like she wasn't even there. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Is that supposed to mean something?" Her breath hitched. I finally turned to her, my gaze sharp enough to cut through whatever pathetic excuse she was about to offer. "You spent 2 years choosing him, Claire. You don't get to stand here now and act like you didn't know exactly what you were doing." She wiped at her eyes, her breathing uneven. "I still love you," she choked out. I felt a slow, bitter smirk pull at my lips. "No, you don't." She blinked. "If you loved me," I continued, voice calm, "you wouldn't have thrown away everything we built. If you loved me, you wouldn't have looked me in the eye every day and lied." Her lower lip trembled. "Ethan, please." I set my coffee down, exhaling slowly. "I'm leaving," I said simply. Her face crumpled. "What?" I shrugged. "I moved my money. Found a new place. I'm done, Claire." Panic flooded her expression. "Wait, no. We can fix this?" I laughed again, a hollow sound. Fix this. She reached for me, but I stepped back, watching the realization sink in. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to lose. To wake up and realize that everything she thought was safe was slipping through her fingers. And there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Claire didn't take it well. I expected tears. I expected begging. What I didn't expect was the sheer desperation in her eyes as she scrambled to find a way to stop the inevitable. You can't just walk away, she said, her voice shaky but firm. We've been together too long for you to just give up on us. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. You gave up on us the moment you crawled into bed with him. She flinched like I had struck her. Good. She had spent 2 years gutting me without ever lifting a finger. Now it was her turn to bleed. Ethan, please, she tried again, stepping toward me. We can work through this. People survive things like this. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you were planning to tell Jason when you left me for him? Her breath hitched. Because I knew. I had found the messages she never meant for me to see. The ones where she entertained the idea of leaving me, where she told Jason she wasn't ready yet, but just needed more time. Time to what? Find the perfect moment to rip my heart out? I smirked, shaking my head. You weren't planning to fix this, Claire. You were just planning to get caught on your terms. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't let her finish. Does Jason know? I asked casually, watching her carefully. She stilled. Her silence was all the answer I needed. I chuckled, rubbing a hand over my jaw. That's what I thought. She hadn't told him. She had been playing both of us, weaving a careful web of lies, making sure she had a safe landing no matter which way she fell. But what she didn't realize was that I had already set the whole damn thing on fire. I left for work that morning like nothing had happened. Let her sit with the weight of it. Let her stew in the ruins of her perfect little lie. But before I walked out the door, I dropped one last bomb. I'd start packing if I were you, I said over my shoulder. The lease is in my name. You've got a week. She paled. Ethan, wait. I shut the door before she could finish, because I was done waiting. Claire called me 7 times that day. I ignored every single one. By lunchtime, she had resorted to texts. Claire, please, we need to talk. Just once. Claire, I know I messed up, but don't do this. Please, Ethan. Claire, I don't know where to go. I don't have anywhere else. Lies. She had Jason. She had always had Jason. But here was the thing. Jason didn't know that yet, and I was about to fix that. That evening, I sent Jason a message. No threats. No anger. Just 3 photos. Claire's car outside our apartment, her in our kitchen, and the lease document with my name on it. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Jason. I let it ring. Then I sent a text. Me. Looks like she's your problem now. And then, for the first time in 2 years, I turned my phone off, exhaled, and felt free. By the time I got home that night, Claire was a wreck. She was sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes red and swollen. A half-packed suitcase sat beside her, clothes haphazardly thrown inside like she had started to leave, but then realized, too late, that she had nowhere to go. Jason knows, she said as soon as I walked in. I shrugged, tossing my keys onto the counter. Yeah, I figured. Her lower lip trembled. Why would you do that? I laughed. Actually laughed. Are you serious? You had no problem lying to both of us, but the second it backfires, you're suddenly the victim? She flinched, her hands tightening around the fabric of her sweater. Ethan, please. I don't have anywhere else to go. You had him, I said flatly. Or was that another lie? She shook her head quickly, strands of hair falling loose around her face. I thought, she swallowed. I thought he would. I thought he loved me. I smirked, tilting my head. And let me guess. The moment he realized you weren't just his little secret, he panicked? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I had seen it before, the way people like Jason operated. He never wanted to have Claire. He just wanted to steal her. But now that she was exposed, now that there was nowhere left to hide, the illusion had shattered. And she had nothing. No backup plan. No comforting words. Just the silence of the home that was no longer hers. Good. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You're still leaving," I reminded her. She wiped at her face, desperation leaking into her voice. "Ethan, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, please don't make me go out there with nothing." I stared at her, taking a slow sip. "You had everything, Claire, and you threw it away." Her breathing hitched. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did." I cut her off. "You chose this. Every day. Every lie. You just didn't think you'd have to pay for it." She sucked in a sharp breath, but I wasn't done. "Pack your bags," I said, my voice cold, final, "and get the hell out of my house." Claire left that night. She didn't beg anymore. She didn't argue. She just packed what she could fit into 2 suitcases and walked out the door, pausing only once to glance back at me like she was hoping, praying, that I'd change my mind. I didn't. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching her disappear down the hallway, knowing that I would never see her again. And for the first time in years, I felt whole, because I wasn't the man she had broken anymore. I was the man who had survived her. The apartment was too quiet without her. For 2 years, Claire had been living a double life, but for 13 years before that, she had been my life. Now, with her gone, the space felt like a hollow shell, filled only with the echoes of a past I no longer recognized. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, my bedroom now, and took it all in. Her side of the closet was empty. The bathroom counter, once cluttered with her makeup and perfumes, was bare. The bed felt too big. I should have felt relief, victory, even. But all I felt was exhaustion, like my body was just now catching up to the weight of everything I had been carrying. I sank onto the mattress, rubbing a hand over my face. This was what I wanted. This was what she deserved. Then why did it still hurt? The next morning, I woke up for the first time in years without Claire's alarm blaring next to me, without the smell of her coffee lingering in the air, without her presence filling the space before I even opened my eyes. I rolled over, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't regret. It wasn't longing. It was just empty. I forced myself up, showered, got dressed, and left for work like nothing had changed. But everything had. I passed by the coffee shop we used to go to on Sunday mornings, the bookstore where she'd spent hours picking out novels she'd never actually finish, the restaurant where I had once planned to propose to her. And with every step, the reality of it all sank in. Claire wasn't just gone. She had never really been here in the first place. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around. She had disappeared long before I ever caught her cheating, and I had been too blind to see it. That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos, searching for something. Some proof that what we had meant something once. There we were at the beach, her arms wrapped around my neck, smiling like I was the only man in the world. There we were on our first vacation, laughing over a dinner that had been too expensive but worth every penny. There we were at Christmas, at weddings, at friends' parties, image after image of a love I thought was real. But now, all I could see were the cracks. The way her smile had started to change. The way her eyes had started to drift elsewhere. The way I had been losing her for years, and I never even noticed. I exhaled sharply, shutting off my phone and tossing it onto the nightstand. Claire was a ghost now, a lingering shadow in a life that no longer belonged to her. And soon, I would be free of her completely. A month passed. Then 2. Claire was gone. At first, I expected her to reach out, to call, to text, to try and claw her way back into my life. But she never did. And that silence? That was how I knew it had never been real. Because if she had truly loved me, even just a little, she would have fought for me. But Claire only ever fought for herself. I heard about her through mutual friends. She had tried to stay with Jason, but it hadn't lasted. Apparently, he had never been planning to leave his wife for her. Shocking, right? She had bet everything on him, on the idea that he would be her safety net, her escape. But when he realized she had nowhere else to go, he cut her off. She had lost both of us, and I didn't feel a single ounce of sympathy. One evening, I found a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name, written in a familiar, delicate script. Claire. I almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity won. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I had first told her to pack her bags, and unfolded the letter with careful hands. Ethan, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything from you, but I need you to hear this. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything, but I need you to know that when I told you I loved you, it wasn't a lie. I just didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. I hope, wherever you are, you find the happiness I was too selfish to give you. Claire. I stared at the words for a long time, waiting for something. Anger, sadness, regret. But there was nothing left to feel, because this was Claire's last lie. She hadn't written this letter for me. She had written it for herself, to make herself feel better, to pretend that she hadn't spent years betraying me. She wanted closure. She wanted to know that I had read her words and felt something, but I didn't. I folded the letter, stood up, and tossed it into the trash without another thought, because Claire was my past, and I was finally free. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.